Hello and welcome back to RageGamingVideos and a new episode of Elden Ring Things You Didn't Know. I'm excited to say that today I've got some things that I had no idea you could do, and they're very important to know with certain builds, as well as some very interesting details to do with weapons, and of course some strange mechanics you could use for maybe an RP character. But enough talking about what's in the episode, let's begin the video. We begin today's episode here in the debate parlor of the Academy. This is where you fight the Red Wolf of Radagon for the first time, likely relieved you defeat him with the grace, and then we can move on to the open area and up to the main boss fight, Renala. But as we go through this room, you might actually stop and pay a bit of attention. Around the room are some really important paintings and portraits of very important characters. Obviously we have Renala right there, which is interesting, but then I believe that's Selene as well. She must have been a very important character to the Academy indeed to get a portrait. But throughout all of the Academy, as you enter one of the first rooms you step into, there's a common theme: familiar faces, constantly seen. In fact, living sorcerers and people learning at the Academy are these guys. Or maybe you would first think so when you see them, because all those sorcerers that are attacking you as you make your way through the Academy, they're wearing masks. Hollowed out statue heads would probably be more of an accurate description though. They're wearing the very image of these characters here. In fact, you can get those statue heads yourself and learn a little bit more about these characters. The Karalos glintstone crown here is apparently the oldest of the Academy's lineages of study, begat by the sorcerer Azur. They study the comets, whereas the Livinus glintstone crown follows the lineage of Lusat. These are the two primordial or primeval sorceries, and two types at that. Then we have the twin sage glintstone crown, which represents two in a way, allowing them to study multiple types of sorcery kinds. But it was Lofsky who had a look at this Academy and the individuals involved in it, allowing us to take a real deep look at these different headpieces, at these different NPCs, and even compare them next to the portrait to see who is following which. As you can see, there's more here. A third and a fourth/fifth statue head exists to represent other studies of the magic, and who these statue head wearing scholars are actually following and which sort of faction they're part of. As always, I would recommend you check out Slofsky on Twitter. They're a constant source of really interesting renders and looks at different aspects of Elden Ring that you might not have the time to really look at when you're playing and running around and being attacked. There's so many fantastic little details that this Twitter account is highlighting, so I really recommend it. Next up, we have the most popular thing in the comments of the last episode, which surprised me because I thought this was more common knowledge than I must have realized. That Dude Beast was commenting about how you can alter your garments, and there's some obvious aspects to that, but apparently a more subtle aspect that people didn't realize. I'm wearing the Vagabond Knight armor, and this is the original set. As you can see, it weighs 10.6 and provides some damage negation options. But the altered version is actually lighter, but sadly has weaker damage negation options. The difference between the two is quite clear. You are literally just unequipping the cape, which reveals what's actually on your back, which is a nice way to get some extra detail. I love the little bags and the little dagger, for example, on the back, and I prefer it without the cape personally because of that little subtle detail. But apparently the lesser known aspect of altering your garments is how it actually changes the item description. So we have a hood here. It's one of the dancer hoods from the village of the windmills, decorated with many coloured flowers. When I would alter it, the description changes to a stunning array of flowers. Kind of a subtle and less exciting one. You can see how some of them radically change. The Confessor's hood here has 3 paragraphs of information, but then the altered one is straight so simple. Such hoods are made for blending in with the darkness. Some items have important lore to the context of the armor, such as the prophet robe here. Shackles around the neck warn passerbys not to lend an ear to their sermons, but should we alter it, we remove that part, and that description then is removed also, instead saying made from rough fabric that scrapes against the skin like a sharpening file. That doesn't sound all that nice to me. Some have very important effects though, such as the rotten Gravekeeper cloak, a cloak that's been eaten through by scarlet rot and is a symbol of an underground Gravekeeper station. But as soon as we remove that cloak, you can just get a good look at sort of the snake arm bands that go around it. And so the description changes as well as seemingly the mechanic, because the wearer becomes a slightly easier target for foes. Quite the change, and it's something that's definitely worth looking into with specific items and learning a little bit more lore about the characters that you've taken these pieces from. Next, we have a really neat one to do with the sorcery Unseen Blade. Now, Unseen Blade is perhaps one of the least used sorceries, maybe just like an incant/sorcery combined in all of Elden Ring, because it's just not that effective. What we're talking about here is the sorcery that allows you to hide your weapon. So it looks like I'm no longer holding that dagger. Of course I am, and I can still use it like I am. You'd think maybe there'd be some purposes to that in PvP, but truly if someone's running to attack you, it doesn't really matter whether you can see their weapon or not, just mechanically, and it plays no real role in PvE either. It's a cool sorcery, but just one that doesn't seem to have a practical use. But did you know that you can buff up a weapon with Unseen Blade and it basically reveals the weapon while it is buffed? So you still got that sort of Unseen Blade effect occurring, but then suddenly my weapon reappears when buffed. So in the case of, say, a buff like Seppuku, where I don't have a weapon in my hands and then I stab myself with nothing, suddenly the blade reappears, now buffed up. Or with a really cool one, Flaming Strike, where the blade doesn't actually reappear until I strike with the fire, which suddenly reveals it with its fire emblazoned. It's a neat kind of random effect. I've got my fire sword still and I'm attacking with that fire, but you just can't see it anymore. But then I activate the buff, suddenly it is revealed once more. This was noticed by Reddit user SPD, who posted it on the official Elden Ring Reddit, and it was an incredibly popular post. They were basically showing off a few of the different combinations they've had a look at and thought were cool, in theme with a build or a vibe of a character, suddenly revealing that weapon or blade or attack in very cosmetically pleasing ways. So if you're looking to do a bit of RP in a playthrough, maybe with a specific unique character, this could be a really cool aspect to add to it. And it's certainly a thing I didn't know, so thank you to Josh for pointing me towards that Reddit post. Next up, we have one from the comments once again, from MMC Mullen, who follows up on my question from last time. Basically, what we did in the last episode was take a look at two weapons, the Sword of St. Trina and the Regalia of Eocade, which were weapons directly inspired by real-world weapons, and quite unique ones at that. After we took a look at that topic, I thought that was a really cool thing to look at, and I was wondering, was there any other weapons in Elden Ring that were inspired by very unique weapons and things in the real world, historic or otherwise? And one that came up here from MMC Mullen is Rivers of Blood, of course. This is actually a very popular thing to recreate in media, whether that's a comic book series, whether it's video games or otherwise. This is a very popular concept. So what we're looking at here with the Rivers of Blood, the cursed weapon, the cursed red katana. According to Mullen, this is based on the Japanese Muramasa. The concept is it's a cursed sword that desires blood, much like Okina here in Elden Ring. I'm standing where he first invades you, and this is where you get Rivers of Blood originally. The description of this character is that the more he sharpened his mind, the more absurdities of the world came into stark relief, and so Okina renounced it all and rose to a higher plane. There was only himself, his katana, and its mastery. Before long, he became a demon of a swordsman, basically just mad for combat, killing and soaking his blade in blood, and that's why it's basically this deep red colour. Of course, that lore went on to involve Moog and so on the Cursed Blood, but ultimately this was a cursed katana before all of that. Obviously, the lore of this character, Okina, is directly inspired by the concept of a blood-hungry swordsman. By wielding his very blade, you become overwhelmed with bloodlust. And as Mullen said, it's shown in a lot of media. Always a sort of red katana. One of my favourite games ever, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, that has a really important character called Sam, who is wielding his own version of that. Just a futuristic version with a sheath that has a quick draw, like blast mechanic. But it also shows up in, say, the Marvel universe as well. Or there's a version of it in One Piece with my favorite character Zoro. He is using one of those cursed swords that desires combat and blood. It is a sort of short story and aspect of that character that shows up quite early in the series. So yes, a blood-hungry, red, messy katana is a common theme based on the original sort of Japanese myth. And the Rivers of Blood storyline with Okina and that character is directly taken from that, which is very cool to know. I was asking in the last episode though if you guys knew any other examples of this type of thing, and unfortunately a lot of people were memeing me. Obviously we have the Greatsword here, which is inspired by Guts from Berserk and his giant dragon slaying style Greatsword. And then a pretty common one was, did you know the Zweihander was inspired by the real world weapon, the Zweihander. It's like, yes, thank you guys. Obviously, I meant more unique ones like the one we talked about today. So if you do have any other examples, much like Mullen had there, then I would love to hear it and maybe include it in this series. Last up for today's episode then comes from Nightwalker in the comments also, with an incredible tip to do with the dragon incantations, those transformations. A common theme through these transformations is the original form, the kind of weaker version, and then the more expensive but more powerful version. And it comes with a name to do with the dragon that you get it from generally. So we have Agheel's Flame compared to just normal Dragonfire, Glintstone Breath, that's Smaragd's Glintstone Breath, and then we have Dragon Ice up to Borealis Mist. Those more powerful, expensive ones can be channeled and hit a really wide area, obviously much more expensive on the FP, but you know, from the benefit the damage. But there's an aspect to these transformations that's really important to know, something I was completely unaware of until I read this comment. It's very important to know if you're going to use these. You can use these Dragon Breaths while riding on the back of torrents, so while you are moving. That's an incredibly valuable thing to know in the open world, isn't it? Especially. But the downside is the fact that you cannot use the more powerful versions, but you can use the weaker one. So Dragonfire here compared to Agheel's Flame cannot be used while mounted, but Dragonfire, that absolutely can. And you move with reasonable speed until you're actually doing the full cast. Once that starts going, you're still moving, you can still avoid attacks, and you can be a bit mobile with your AoE or range attacks, especially against open world enemies or bosses in particular. And it works with all of them. Glintstone Breath instead of the more powerful one, again the same thing if you're looking to do magic damage, or Dragon Ice if you're looking for that magic damage with a bit of ice effect to it, get that pop, maybe provide that debuff to an enemy while moving, and in fact AoE at great range as well. This is a really cool thing to know, and something I read and I was like, oh my god, I did not think you could do that. I've never seen it before. So that's a great comment, Nightwalker. Thank you very much. But as always, you need to have the weapon in your two hands ready to go, and then you're actually able to do the casting. You can change whatever's in your main hand while mounted, so it's not like that's an issue, but you do need to have it in two hands for that to actually work, just as a little addition. Not only is this really effective and neat to know, but it looks so cool while you're mounted up at the same time. But there you have it, another episode down once again. A huge thank you to you guys getting involved, the back and forth in the comments, the new things that I was completely unaware of today. If there's anything that you know that could be included in this series that hasn't yet so far been in the series, then let me know in the comments down below. I want to say another special thank you for so many people getting involved with specifically that, the discussions and getting involved in this series. I don't know if I've ever had more of a pile of things to look into in this series, and we're like almost at 40 episodes. I can't wait for the DLC to imbue new things to look into, but honestly, we still have so much more to look at. That's fantastic. For now then, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.